If it's not possible for a video game to be perfect, then the Aquatic Adventure of the Last Human is about as close to it as we're ever gonna get. For clarity's sake, I should probably define what I mean by perfect, since this statement is sure to pique the curiosity and maybe even the anger of a few of you who are watching this video. For me, a perfect game is one that's as engaging and enjoyable as it is long. Save for 2 slightly annoying boss fights and a bit of tedious backtracking, the Aquatic Adventure has this quality in spades. Not only is this game basically an underwater Metroid, my favorite game of all time, but it's a blast to play that never wears out its welcome. Let's break the experience down to determine whether the Aquatic Adventure of the Last Human is right for you. First, let's talk about you explorers out there. These are players who enjoy exploring a game's world-defined adventure and treasure. So as I mentioned earlier, the Aquatic Adventure is like playing Metroid underwater, but instead of controlling a super bad space warrior on a hostile planet, you instead control a spaceship turned submarine through a new Earth completely submerged underwater, and more on why that's the case a little bit later. As such, you'll be equally rewarded and challenged based on your decisions to explore the world around you. Traversing the submerged Earth, you're likely to come across power-ups for your ship turned submarine, and these power-ups will be necessary to help you win battles against some of the most creative bosses I've seen in all of the exploratory adventure games I've ever played. Just like Metroid, you'll also be given the freedom to tackle some of the challenges in the game in the order of your choosing. Even if you choose a path that leads you to encounter a boss who outclasses you, you may still be able to win if you're good enough at shooting and moving to evade the enemy's attacks. This is an excellent display not only of robust design and programming, but it allows the player to affect the world in the way that we choose, instead of being forced to play the game the way the designers intended us to. And on that wise, I noticed as I was playing, I did several of the bosses out of order. But the beauty of this scenario is that when I finally made it back to the bosses I was supposed to fight and unintentionally skipped, they were a cakewalk to beat, and it really gave me a sense of empowerment to know that I bested several bosses before I was supposed to be able to do so. And lastly, for my explorers, you'll be pleased to know that the game's save points also double as fast travel hubs. This was a feature that brings the Metroid formula into the next generation, something I actually would have begged for in Axiom Verge. Unfortunately, there's no way to know where you're supposed to be going in most cases, so without good memorization skills, there's a good chance you're going to spend a little bit of time lost trying to figure out where you're supposed to go next, especially as you get closer to the end of the game. Alright, for my action junkies or the players who enjoy fast-paced, exciting action. Okay, in 2016, I feel like I shouldn't have to bring up this idea of tight controls, but they're worth mentioning in the Aquatic Adventure, not just because they're tight, but because they're masterfully designed to actually add challenge to the game's combat in ways that are inventive and actually fun versus tedious. And I found it particularly interesting that there was no real combat outside of boss fights. But I enjoy this concept in practice because it never lets the game wear you out fighting the same enemies over and over again as you traverse the abandoned Earth. But the good news here is that in the boss fights you encounter, you're going to have to use every maneuver and skill your ship can handle to fight, survive, and win. And this formula really makes an excellent balance between peaceful exploration and chaotic warfare. The fact that I got murdered multiple times in almost every boss fight I encountered, but kept coming back with a smile after every beating, is really a testament to how well YCJY designed the action in the Aquatic Adventure. I can only think of 2 boss fights that were a bit more difficult than they probably should have been, but even that minor frustration didn't deter me from wanting to continue playing the game after multiple beatings. And so for my bookworms or my players who love a good story, the Aquatic Adventure of the Last Human is the epitome of what I think video game storytelling should be. There's no arduous cutscenes, there's no overblown cinematics, and there's no dialogue sequences that made me want to gouge my eyes out like most titles released after 1995 were. Here we're treated with a narrative mostly told through the dark and dire world you're forced to explore and survive. So I for one was very thankful that they avoided the Hollywood approach that's been made popular by games that started in the PlayStation era. But for those of you who do prefer a bit more flavor to your narrative, you will find holotapes strewn about the Earth designed to give you more backstory in 140 characters or less, thank God, about what's happened to humanity since you left Earth thousands of years ago on a space expedition to find a new livable world for your people. Okay, so for my audiophiles or players who love a game's music and sound production, not only is the Aquatic Adventure soundtrack absolutely gorgeous, but it perfectly fits the mood and tone and setting of the different zones you'll spend time exploring. There's a mixture of nostalgic sci-fi synths meshed together with dreary minor chords to sell you on just how hopeless your situation is. But the producers also found room for more upbeat tunes to hint to the player that maybe there is hope for the human race yet. The Aquatic Adventure employs an excellent use of sound that's better than most games I've played in the last few years. In the end, the Aquatic Adventure of The Last Human is a masterpiece, combining both the joy of old school play with new school conventions. It's a must-play if you, like me, often miss the simple joy of playing video games made during the 80s and 90s. That's going to do it for me, friends. Thank you so much for tuning into my review for the Aquatic Adventure of The Last Human. Many thanks also going out to CJY for hooking me up with a copy to review. I hope that those of you who are like me, who really enjoy old school games kind of brought into the new school, will give this game a shot. I definitely think it's worth your time, definitely worth your money. It's just long enough to make you feel like you got something substantial, but it's also way too fun and engaging to ignore. So give it a shot if you are interested. And as always, friends, subscribe to Alloy 7 if you have not already, so that we can continue bringing you awesome videos just like this. And until next time, friends, until all are one, my name is BC. Thank you for watching. Remember to be excellent to each other, because we are stronger than I love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.